What's going on, team? It's Coach Mentor Crypto Clip. Now, I was just talking to a friend of mine, and he reminded me of this story of something that actually happened to me. I had a lot of people, some people come to me oftentimes and actually dive into my DM saying that, bro, I know you grew up with a silver spoon in your mouth, and that's the furthest thing from the truth. Truth be told, I grew up with absolutely nothing. And my family is not a wealthy family at all. We had to work hard for everything that we do and everything that we get, and a lot of us are still working hard. But it reminded me of a story, right, of how I got fired on my day off. So my all-time favorite job was this spot called Joe Patty's Seafood. Now, Joe Patty's is a seafood market that's ran, operated, and owned by this guy named Frank Patty, who's an old friend of my grandfather's, right? One of the biggest seafood distributors, biggest seafood markets on the Gulf Coast in Pensacola, Florida, where I'm actually born and raised, right? So this is my all-time favorite job because I love everything about fishing. I love everything about sea life. I originally wanted to go to school to be a marine biologist. So I'm working. Me and Frank Patty, the owner, who's an older guy, really good dude, but really hardcore, right? Older. I think he's Greek or whatever. So I'm working. I've been there for about a year, putting in work. We went through hurricanes, rebuilt the store up, everything, right? So one day I had this manager named Larry. Larry was a little unorthodox. He was really kind of quirky a little bit, right? Cool dude. He actually invited me to a bar one time. Ended up being one of the most racist experiences I've ever had in my life. That's a whole nother story, right? But Larry called me one day. This was on a Saturday. This is one of my only Saturdays I've ever had off. Larry called me and said, "Hey, Clip, I need you to come in, man. Listen, we're short-staffed. I need you to come in." I said, "Larry, no problem. I got you." You know, I'm always about making that money. Even back then when I had a job, I was always about making that money. So I came in, did the first shift. Knocked out the first shift. No problem at all. Larry said, "Can you stay for a second shift?" All I tell you, the store was jam-packed full of people, and we were completely understaffed. No problem, Larry. I get that money. Stayed for the second shift. Halfway through my second shift, Frank Patty came up. He walked up to me and said, "Son, what are you doing here?" I don't know how Frank knew it was my day off. He had over 100 employees at Joe Patty's. He knew everything about everybody, right? So Frank Patty came up and he was like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "Well, he's supposed to be a day off." I said, "Larry called me in." "Larry didn't call you in. Nobody called you in. Nobody told you to be here today." I said, "Well, Larry called me and said y'all was short-staffed. We're not short-staffed. We got enough people. Go home." I said, "Okay, cool, no problem." I said, "Well, I'll see you tomorrow." Tomorrow, the next day was payday. "I'll see you tomorrow." Get my check. He said, "You'll see me tomorrow to pick up your check, but you won't see me tomorrow to work. You're fired for stealing time." I said, "What?" This was my day off. I was literally helping on my day off, and I got fired. So fast forward, I'm pissed at this point, right? I go tell my grandfather. My grandfather called up the Frank Patty, Frank, he was like in his almost 90s, right? So I go home. So you know what? Forget it. I'm done. It is what it is. Go in the next day to pick up my check. Because I had a 4 a.m. to roughly around 12 a.m. time period. It's usually the time I work, 4 a.m. to 12 p.m. I go in at 8 a.m. the next morning to pick up my check. The first thing I see is Frank. Frank looked at me and said, "Where were you today? Where were you this morning, son? Where were you this morning?" I said, "You fired me yesterday." "No, I didn't. I told you to go." I said, "You fired me yesterday. You literally said you are fired." He said, "Well, guess what, son? I need you back in here, man. Can you come tomorrow morning?" "No, I can't come tomorrow morning." So that's how I actually got fired on my day off. Just a bunch of different stories, talking to my friends. It really reminded me of that particular incident where I actually got fired for trying to do the right thing. And Larry threw me completely under the bus because he actually went back and told Frank that he never told me to come in. I seen Larry when I was walking out with my paycheck, and Larry said, "Listen, man, it was either you or me. I'm sorry. Point blank period. It was either you or me. I'm sorry." But cases like that are situations like that really help you build your character, because I could have easily went back and said, "You know what? I'm going back to work." Nah. I stood on my ground and said I would never, ever. And it took me almost 15 years before I even stepped back into that business. But that's how I got fired on my day off. Stay tuned for more stories. I got you.